Hi, my name is Shivam and welcome to Navoki channel. And today we are going to talk about Model Context Protocol. So what is Model Context Protocol and why everyone is talking about it? So this video is mostly for beginners, whether you are mobile developer, web developer or regarding some other tech stack. Also, I have created a project in this video which is using Dart as an MCP server, but understand that MCP is a concept applicable to any languages. So whether you are working on PHP, Kotlin or Python, this video will help you too. So Anthropic had come up with this protocol and it is widely adaptable and usable in this industry. And this is to communicate between the LLM and other vendor providers like Gmail, Figma, Firebase. So LLM, the thinking boss, can actually perform some tasks using those tools provided via MCP. So let's talk about before MCP. So suppose you have a business one, and you have an AI app, and you want to integrate a Gmail to this so that you can send emails via your LLM apps. Now for to integrate this Gmail integration, you have to write the code in JavaScript or Python and implement those features. So till now everything is good. But suppose same business has another AI app and want to integrate the same Gmail feature. But let's say there are 4 more features into this. So they have to code that Gmail features again. Now suppose Gmail update their new features in their APIs, so you have to change your code in both the features. And suppose you want to add another third party service here also. So you have to write the code for the same. So how MCP solve these problems? So it says that you have an LLM that is a thinking boss, and each provider has created their own MCP which performs some tasks. There can be task 1, suppose tool 1, there can be task 2, tool 2, and there can be n number of tasks, suppose tool 50 numbers. So here LLM is a thinking boss, but it cannot perform anything. So MCP act as a bridge that LLM will decide what tools to trigger and in what sequence, and will return the result back to the user. And suppose there is a user who want to push a Git and send an email about that Git information to its manager via email. So user will type bug fixed and send email. So this query will send to LLM, and LLM will understand the intent that it has two tasks. Suppose one is the Git push and other is the email send. So it will send to the MCP server, and there will be two MCPs. One will be regarding Gmail MCP and other will be Git MCP. So first LLM will trigger Git, commit, push the code, and then will use that information to compose an email and then trigger the Gmail MCP to send the email. And in this way we are automating and doing multiple tasks with just a single prompt. Now suppose there are changes in the Gmail MCP and Git MCP. So those MCP will be changed by their vendor provider and will publish. So we don't have to change anything, and LLM will simply use that new MCP to trigger those tools. Now because we have a common tool now, these MCPs can be used by any LLM provider, whether it can be an OpenAI, Gemini, Claude, DeepSeek, anyone you want can be used. Any provider you want, you can attach this MCP to that LLM provider and you're good to go. It's just like a plug and play. So now we can break these MCP into 3 components. So first is MCP host, second is MCP client, and third is MCP server. So MCP host is mostly the application part, which is AI powered or LLM powered application. This can be your any IDE like Cursor. It can be your CLIs like Gemini CLI, or it can be your own app. It can be a web app, desktop or server application which is AI powered. Any application where you entering prompt to perform a task, even using a button click, that application will act as an MCP host. So MCP client is responsible to send and receive the response between MCP server using JSON RPC 2.0 standard. MCP clients provide whatever the tool MCP server has and give back to the MCP host, which return back to LLM. And then LLM, the thinking bot, decides which tool to trigger or which MCP server need to trigger. Also remember that one host can have multiple MCP clients, and each MCP client will be connected to one MCP server only, MCP server 2. But one host can have multiple application clients. And with this collection of MCP clients, the LLM will decide which tools to trigger according to the user query. It will understand the intent and create a collection of MCP client to trigger the tools on the MCP server. So when you hear that GitHub has released their own MCP server, Firebase and Flutter has released their own MCP server, this is what means. MCP server is the place where all tools are made and where the execution takes place. Now MCP server consists of three parts. There can be optional one part only, or it can be all three parts at the same times. So first is tool. So tools consist of scripts or programming, which may be file handling. It can be REST APIs. It can be third party or authentication service. The second part is resource. Resource consists of mostly knowledge base. Knowledge base consists of one or collection of databases. It can be a collection of your documentations, or it can be a simple CSV or JSON file where you can read the data and send back to the LLM. And the third part is prompts. Prompts are reusable prompt statements. So prompts can be few lines to multiple pages long. So we stored a fixed part of prompts in the MCP server and just changed the variable part by passing it as a parameter. Suppose the prompt is send email to. This can be a fixed prompt, while we can pass a variable, suppose email, as a variable with the help of LLM. Now these MCP server can have one or two tools, or it can also have 10 tools with 2 database access. So it's very dependent upon the vendor provider who is creating the MCP server. So within MCP server, the connection between MCP client and MCP server is established in two ways. The first is studio method. So studio method means handling the standard input-output operation, which is mostly used for file handling process. Another method is HTTP method. So REST API, using REST API authentications, database, documentations, and any other accessing online JSON and files, we use HTTP method. So MCP server can implement both or either one. In the current example that we are going to implement in Dart, I am going to use studio method only. So now how everything works internally, let's see that. So suppose MCP host, our application is launched, which is already have some LLM access. So when it is launched, and MCP clients is established, MCP clients connects with MCP server to get the list of tools. MCP server returns the list of tools back to MCP client, and MCP client returns this to LLM to be used later, not immediately. Then MCP host or user sends a query. The LLM will understand the intent behind the user query and create a list of instructions according to the tools that is been sent by the MCP client previously. It will send I want tool 1 to execute. MCP client will send this request to MCP server. Tool 1 will get executed. It will return the response from tool 1, and MCP client will send this response back to LLM. LLM will understand the response and the user query and give back result to the MCP host, that is application, so the user can read that information. Misconceptions about MCP. So there are many misconceptions about MCP, and I am answering few of them here. MCP will replace REST API. The answer is no, and I understand why people will think, because actually MCP is also triggering some script and REST API behind the scene at the MCP server. but both have different way of communicating. REST API is still usable as an HTTP method along different framework, and MCP is actually just a standard to communicate with the LLM. MCP is a framework. No. MCP is not a framework, it's a standard protocol. It's a concept how to send and receive message using JSON RPC 2.0. And this communication can be established with any programming language or frameworks, whether it's Python, Kotlin, Flutter, anyone you want. Fast MCP is the way to implement MCP. The answer is no, because Fast MCP is a library by Python, and most videos or tutorials Fast MCP to implement a MCP server and MCP client. But actually you can use any programming language. Not only that, you can create MCP server in PHP and create a MCP client in Dart, and both can communicate each other. MCP can be used with LLM only. The answer is yes and no. Although the MCP was created in the first place to be used in the LLM powered application so that LLM can trigger something on MCP server, but MCP client and MCP server can be triggered by a normal logic, if else or switch statements too with logical operation. You don't need LLM for this. MCP locks you into one vendor. The answer is no. That is, suppose if I created one MCP to be utilized in the Android Studio or Cursor IDE, you can still use that MCP server in your CLI or any AI powered based applications. Not only that, if I create an MCP server in PHP and can utilize that MCP server as an MCP client created in Python, JavaScript, Kotlin, any language you want. So MCP is actually a plug and play across any AI applications. Now let's create our own MCP server. So I'm creating a new Dart CLI applications here. So for this project, I'm going to create a simple MCP server that will send an email according to the user query. So first of all, go to the pubsec.ml and add these two packages, Dart MCP and Mailer. Dart MCP will handle our MCP implementation and Mailer will be used to send the email. Now remove all the code. So first in the main function, we are going to initialize a channel which will be studio channel. This studio channel means we are going to use file handling and executing the script. So now we will create our own MCP server, my email MCP server, which will extend MCP server class from the library and extend with tool support, because we are going to add one tool only for now. Okay. Now our initial class is ready and we are going to create an object of this MCP server here. And we pass the channel into MCP server. So any input that will be passed using standard input output will be captured by the studio channel and will be passed to our MCP class automatically. We don't have to do the input and output handling. Everything is done by the library. Now focus on the constructor. Here in the implementation part, we have to mention the name of our MCP. This will be visible outside publicly. So first focus on the super channel, and you can see in the implementation part, we have added a name MCP email server. This MCP email server will be a label and will be publicly available by any MCP client like Claude IntelliJ will show that this name. This is the version. This is the version that we are maintaining for just like a library or an app version. And the instruction. This is a statement that will send to LLM so LLM can understand what this MCP server is actually doing. Now we have to define our tool in two ways. First will be the definition, that is to understand the LLM, what this tool is doing, and second will be the implementation, that is the actual coding that will perform the executions. So first for the declaration, final, send email tool. Okay, it is auto completing. Let's proceed with this. So what it does, this tool will not execute anything. This is totally to be understood by the LLM. There will be no execution at this point. This is just the informations. So I've created a tool and we have mentioned the name of the function that we will implement. That will be send email, the description that this function will send an email to the given recipient with subject and content using the mailer package. Or we can remove this, no need for this prompt. Now this input schema tells the LLM that what kind of parameter our function accepts and what kind of data type each parameter will have. So to will be of string data type and given the description about the parameters, subject, string type, description, subject of the email, content, string type, and description of the email. Now this declaration part you are saying, this is not something new. If you have made some AI agent at some point of level or you are reading about it, this is a very common procedure to declare a definition about the tool that LLM going to use. Going to create a function that will be the actual implementation of our function. So return type will be call tool result. This will be call tool request, as all the response and request is handled by the MCP library. And there you go, all the validations has been added. So as you can see, all the information is being extracted by the call to request. So call to request contains all the input received in the standard input output. So first argument is the two, that the email, the subject, and the string. So this request is actually sent by the LLM to the MCP server. This is not being sent by the user. It is actually sent by the LLM, and LLM understand from here what kind of function it is and what kind of parameter this tool is accepting. So what is content.s? This is actually a structure. That's how we send information back to LLM, that as a reply. So if you have generated some kind of Gen AI applications, you must be familiar with this. So I'm going to remove this delay code and add an actual email code. So this is our SMTP server. So here we are going to enter the dummy username password. I'm going to show how to create a fake email and use that as an SMTP to send emails for the testing purpose only. The second part is to create a message, that is from address, subject, text, content, everything, and then actually sending the email from here. The send function is from the mailer package. This will send the actual email, and then the content tool result will send the information back to the MCP client, and MCP client will send that information back to LLM. Now our MCP server is ready. Okay, it's not ready. One thing we miss, register tool. So any tool we are adding, whether it be sending email, adding database, prompts, anything, we have to register, because if we didn't register, those tool will not be sent to the MCP client, and MCP's client will not send that to the LLM. So we have to mention register tool to inform that MCP server has this kind of tool available to be used. Now our MCP is ready. So I'm going to open a cursor to test this. This is how you add an MCP server to any MCP client. So this first is the label. This label will be shown here like this. This can be any label you want. Then command will be dart, argument will be run, and then the path of the file. So our file path is this file, mcp dart example dart. Now you don't have to run this as a dart function. You can also create binary of this dart into system executable file and then use in the same manner. So I'm going to copy this path. Go to cursor. Now if we go back to the cursor setting, and we can see that a green dot is shown and world tool enabled. That means MCP client from the cursor has successfully established a connection with our MCP server. The tool is not executed, but the communication has been established. In the same way, if I go to the Android Studio, click settings, I have installed Copilot in my Android Studio, and Copilot has an option for MCP. Here, if we click on configure, this opens a JSON file. So I am going to remove this MCP, and I'm going to paste my MCP again. And you can see there is already one Firebase MCP is already attached to it. That means I can use multiple MCP server at a time, and then close it. It's already saved. And if I open the Copilot here, go to the agent mode, then you can see there is a settings icon here. Click on the setting icon, and you can see all the MCP servers are available here. Now these are the built-in tools that comes with the Copilot. The next one is Firebase that I used, and the last one is my custom MCP send email that I just created. So apply, Now to test this email service, we have to enter a real email and password here to send an actual email. Currently, I am putting static values here, but you can pass this information dynamically using user input or from the LLM too. So I am going to use debug mail here to test my email service here. So I'm going to go to settings here and copy this host. So now I'm going to test my email MCP server by typing a prompt, send email with subject MCP test and hello MCP as content to abc at gmail.com. So this is a fake email service just as a developer purpose to test it. So let's see. Okay, so it identified the intent and it identified our MCP tool send email, and it says successfully sent. Hello me successfully sends. Let's go to the browser, refresh, and we received an email. So our MCP is working now. If we go to the text part, you can see the body is also there. So it's a success. So open the terminal and type npx model context protocol inspector. This is an official application that will launch in your local host, so you can test your MCP servers. Click enter. So our inspector is launched here. So here I am passing the same command, dart argument is run, the path to your MCP server, then click on connect. So our connection is established. So now you can see there is a tool option available. If we click on the list tool, it shows that one tool is available. Click on send email and the parameters available that we just created. Send to abc at gmail.com, subject hi, content body. Run this tool. So our email was sent successfully. We can check it again. So we received our second email to here. Now you can see in the MCP inspector in the history sections that I talked about JSON RPC 2.0 as a communication. This is what JSON is sending. Every time a JSON is sent, a response is received in this format. Again, to get the list of the tools, a JSON has been requested. To call a tool, a JSON has been requested with the arguments passed in the functions. So the GitHub code of this project is in the comment. You can try it yourself. And if you have any question regarding MCP, you can comment in below or connect me on social media. Till then, subscribe my channel, like my videos. Bye.